Picture this. You are walking down a quiet residential street in a historic suburb of London. On your left, there is a 6-foot-high brick wall draped in ancient ivy. On your right, a thick, manicured holly hedge that completely obscures the house behind it. You catch only glimpses of life, the top of a sash window, a chimney stack, or the sound of a distant radio. The gardens here are secret. They are private sanctuaries where families can eat lunch in their pajamas or let the dog run free without a single outside eye watching them. This is the fortress model of the home, and for most of the world it is the only way to live. Whether it is the gated villas of Mexico City, the walled courtyards of Marrakesh, or the high timber fences of Melbourne, humanity has spent thousands of years building physical boundaries to define where the public world ends and the family world begins. But then you fly to a typical suburb in Ohio or Texas or California, and the world suddenly opens up in a way that feels almost startling. There are no walls, there are no hedges, there are no stone barriers. Instead, there is a vast, uninterrupted sea of green grass that flows from the sidewalk all the way to the front door of every house. A stranger can walk right up to your living room window and touch the glass. Your entire front yard is on display to every passing car. To a European or a Latin American, this feels exposed, almost naked. To an American, it feels normal. But how did the country that values private property and no trespassing signs more than almost any other on earth become the one place where you aren't allowed to build a wall around your own land? How did the lack of a fence become the ultimate symbol of the American dream? The answer isn't about gardening, it's about a radical shift in American identity that happened exactly 70 years ago, driven by the Cold War, the birth of the suburbs, in a psychological war over what it means to be a good neighbor. To understand the mystery of the missing American fence, we have to realize that this wasn't always the case. If you look at photos of small-town America in the 1880s, you will see a world of fences. Picket fences, iron railings, and stone markers were everywhere. They were practical. They kept stray cows, pigs, and dogs off the porch. But as we moved into the 20th century, and especially after World War II, something shifted. America faced a massive housing shortage, and builders like William Levitt began creating the first mass-produced suburbs. These weren't just houses, they were a new social experiment designed to project a specific image of American prosperity. Levitt and the planners who followed him had a vision of a park-like atmosphere. They wanted the suburbs to look like an endless rolling meadow, and a fence was seen as a visual pollutant that broke their illusion. But there was a deeper, more political layer to this design. We were entering the height of the Cold War, and architecture became a weapon. In the Soviet Union, life was perceived as shadowy and hidden behind iron curtains. To be American was to be open. An open front lawn was a physical manifestation of democratic transparency. If you had nothing to hide, you didn't need a wall. A fence started to be seen as un-American. It suggested that you were unfriendly, or worse, that you were keeping secrets from your community. The front lawn became a public private space, a stage where you perform your status as a responsible, hardworking, and transparent citizen for all to see. This cultural pressure was eventually codified into law through the rise of the Homeowners Association, or the HOA. Today, over 70 million Americans live in communities governed by these organizations, and in many of them, front yard fences are strictly prohibited. The logic is purely aesthetic and economic, managed by the ruthless efficiency of the spreadsheet. The HOA's primary goal is to protect property values, and the theory is that a neighborhood looks more expensive and unified if there are no vertical obstructions. They want the street to look like one giant continuous estate. If one person builds a stone wall and another builds a wooden fence, the flow is broken, and in the world of real estate, broken flow equals lower prices. This created a strange paradox. You own the land, you pay the taxes on it, and you are responsible for mowing every inch of it, but you do not have the right to secure it. The lawn became a collective green carpet that you are merely the steward of. This transformed the yard from a place of utility to a place of performance. You don't actually use your front yard, you maintain it for the benefit of the people driving past it. It is a costume your house wears to prove it belongs in the middle class. The cost of this openness is the total death of visual privacy. In a typical American suburb, the only way to get privacy is to retreat deep inside the house and pull the curtains shut. This has fundamentally changed how Americans interact with their streets. In London or Paris, a person might sit in their walled front garden and watch the world go by through a gate, feeling perfectly secure. In America, because the yard is exposed, people have largely abandoned the front of their homes. They have retreated to the backyard, which is the only place where fences are usually allowed. This created the divided American lot, a public front that is a sterile, unused green desert, and a private back that is hidden away. This has led to what sociologists call the social isolation of the suburb. When everyone is hidden behind their houses or locked behind their garage doors, the street itself becomes a dead zone. There is no middle ground where neighbors can casually interact while remaining on their own territory. You are either totally exposed or totally hidden. Furthermore, the missing fence created what we can call the lawn industrial complex. By banning fences and hedges, the suburban model created a massive forced market for lawn care products. An open lawn requires constant maintenance to look respectable. If you have a wall, no one knows if you have a few weeds or if your grass is a little too long. But without a fence, your lawn is a public report card of your character. A brown patch of grass isn't just a gardening failure, it is a sign that you are letting the neighborhood down. This pressure has fueled a multi-billion-dollar industry of mowers, pesticides, and fertilizers, all dedicated to maintaining a landscape that, ironically, almost no one actually spends time in. We have sacrificed the biological diversity of hedges and the privacy of walls for a monoculture of grass that exists only for the sake of curbside appeal. What makes this so fascinating is how deeply it has been internalized. Most Americans don't walk out their front door and think, "I feel exposed." They think, "What a nice open neighborhood." The lack of a fence has been successfully rebranded as friendliness. We have been conditioned to see a wall as a hostile act. If a new neighbor moved in and immediately put up a 6-foot fence in their front yard, the rest of the street wouldn't think, "Oh, they value their privacy." They would think, "What's wrong with them? Why are they being so aggressive?" The physical architecture has dictated the social etiquette. In most of the world, a fence is a sign of respect. It says, "This is my space and that is yours, and we can be friends across the boundary." In America, the lack of a fence is the sign of respect. It says, "I trust you enough to let you see directly into my life." But as the world changes, this model is beginning to crack. With the rise of porch pirating, home security concerns, and a new generation that values sustainable gardening over mown grass, some Americans are starting to ask why they are paying for land they can't actually use. There are right-to-garden movements and legal battles against HOAs to allow for hedges and edible landscapes instead of grass. People are realizing that the 1950s dream of radical transparency might not fit a 21st century world that feels increasingly crowded and noisy. They are looking at the walled gardens of Europe and the courtyards of the East with a sense of envy. They are realizing that privacy isn't the same thing as secrecy and that a fence isn't a barrier to community. It might actually be the foundation for it. Next time you drive through an American suburb, look at those endless open lawns and realize that you aren't just looking at grass. You are looking at a 70-year-old political statement. You are looking at a legal framework enforced by HOAs to keep property values high. You are looking at a cultural habit that tells us that being a good neighbor means living your life on a stage. The missing fence is a ghost of the Cold War, a remnant of a time when we were terrified of appearing closed off. It is a reminder that the way we design our homes is never just about aesthetics. It is a declaration of who we think we are and what we are willing to sacrifice for the sake of the image. America moved away from fences because it wanted to project a vision of a unified, open, and prosperous society. It worked so well that we stopped even noticing the walls were gone. But as we sit in our backyards, hidden behind the only fences we are allowed to have, we might want to wonder what we lost when we decided that the front of our homes belonged to the neighborhood instead of to us. That is a lot of history sitting on your front lawn, and it's a history that most of us are still mowing every Saturday morning without ever asking why. If we want to reclaim our streets as places for people and not just for flow, we might have to start by reconsidering the power of the fence. Because sometimes the best way to be a good neighbor isn't to show everything, but to provide the space where everyone can finally